Okay, so here I want to explore essentially this concept, and then I want to tie it back to notions of like guilt and shame, ultimately to try to demonstrate, you can call it the absurdity, I like to call it the silliness of those negative viewpoints, for as crippling as they can be and as brutal as it can be to be in them. Definitely speak from experience on that. I think certain higher perspectives, for me, it's certainly not like a thunderclap, oh, my shame and guilt are gone, I'm still dealing with them, but it's certainly a perspective that allows me to take them a little less seriously, get less caught up in them, and I do think it is gradually unwinding the coils I have around some of those things. So let me first lay out the framework I'm talking about here. So here's a person. This could be me. This could be you. This could be a parent of yours. This could be someone on another side of the globe you've never met. If you're in with the extraterrestrial thing, maybe this is even an extraterrestrial we may never meet in our life. This is someone, right? Now, in my metacosmology, right, we have God, we have oneness, we have spirit. Oneness is the pure state of potential from which all arises. There's some disturbance in oneness, which is created deliberately, which generates the physical world. God then is all that is in the physical world, all created, all creating. The entirety of it is God, right? This is God, I'm God, you're God, your screen is God, this is God. I mean, God's all the way down, right? Just one. Spirits, right, are the individuation of God, God manifesting down into these individual perspectives, right, or apertures, through which God can experience the remainder of God's self, and through which God can express God's self. So in other words, if God is just all one thing, right, God can have a total experience of God's self, but God cannot have a particularized experience of God's self, because there's no individual points within God from which God can look back on the remainder, right? There's kind of no vantage, no perspective. And so these spirits are the individual perspectives that God manifests within God's self, so that God can then look out from each perspective, right, and express an experience, right? Express an experience. So then these spirits basically emulate God and then create a series of physical beings like me down here, right, which then do the same thing, right? Spirit is like a little microcosm of God, right? This whole thing is basically macrocosm scaling down. And, right, so spirit, just like God, right? The aperture, but the spirit cannot behold itself, right? It has the same issue God had. It can have a total sense of itself, but not a particularized sense of itself, right? So it then creates these perspectives that allow it to withhold itself, and those are physical beings like me and you, little lowercase i's. And what I don't want to get lost here is that, yes, we're particularizing, right? So we had oneness, the whole, we had God, we then have these spirits manifesting in God to give God perspective. We then have these physical beings manifesting inside each spirit, right? All kind of a Russian doll, cat in the hat situation. But at no time does any of this stop being God. And at no time, actually, does any of it stop being oneness, which is the state of pure potential with no time and no space, from which all the physicality springs, right? So it's oneness all the way down. It's God all the way down. So it's actually oneness all the way down, period. It's God all the way down in experience. It's spirit all the way down in an individual's experience. And it's individual being all the way down in a physical manifestation, right? So where does that leave our little person? Well, our little person may think, right, the way we typically think, which is, this is me. I'm a closed system, right? There's other people around, and they can say, hey, I'm a me too, right? This is a me. You, right? You're not me, but you are to yourself a me, right? But the key here is, I say me is this. This is not me, right? And part of the reason this is so convincing is when we're here in physical reality, right? Like if you were here in the yard with me right now, and you were sitting across from me and we're sharing a water, and I don't know, maybe we decided to have an awkward staring contest, or we just had a conversation, or we decided to arm wrestle or whatever. Through the entirety of that experience, we would have a very, very convincing experience, right? So let's put it in the yard here, right? So here's the me, and here's the you, me. I would look out through these eyes. I do not look out through these eyes. I feel this body from within. I feel this heart beating in my chest. I feel these guts rumbling in my belly. I do not feel those things from within the same way. And so that is what contributes, I think, to this very convincing sense of me-ness, and leads us to naturally draw a line kind of around the edge of our body, because the edge of our body, it's a combination of feeling and control. Our body is the only thing we feel from within, right? I could feel your body. For example, if I were to shake your hand, right? My hand would feel your hand, but only I would feel my hand from within, right? And you would feel your hand from within. I would feel the outside of your hand, you would feel the outside of mine. And so that's how I think we first identify that this is me, and that's you. And you can call yourself me, but you don't mean me, you mean you, which from your perspective is me, right? See how this is kind of silly? And it's because of this strong identification with what we can feel within and what we can control, right? So I can control whether I extend my hand out to shake your hand or not. I cannot control you. I can try to influence you. I can try to manipulate you. I can try to force you. But I cannot control the way I can here with essentially what feels like a deliberate act of the mind, a choice, right? And so it's this combination of feeling from within and having control that just reinforces, right, the hardness. And I may draw multiple lines around this to be like, no, when I am talking about this body, this is me, and everything beyond that is that, right? This and that, me and you, right? Same, other, right? Me, other. And this is where we live much of our lives, right? We may live our whole lives in this perspective. And a downside of this view, right, is because we're this way, we then identify very strongly with what goes on inside that bubble. And we tend to put an importance or a priority here, and then we see what's outside there, right, because it's something else. We go, well, let that deal with itself, right? This is my business. That's your business. This is me, that's you. And in certain ways, of course, healthy boundaries are very important, right? I wouldn't want in any way to say that this is an entirely bad or confused view, right? This can lead to a lot of healthy social interactions, right? If you have no boundaries at all and you're not grounded in your heart, you're likely going to violate a lot of people's space and privacy and create problems. What I'm saying, though, is if we take this entirely seriously and don't recognize that it's actually a construct of our minds, then all the cravings, right, that happen in here, all the impulses and thoughts that are happening here, all the confusion that may be happening in our heart because it's not fully open, right, we're then going to essentially get stuck and loop around this thing, around this body and around this brain, right, this part of the body which is channeling mind. And so the thoughts that arise in here, right, we may fixate on them very tightly and coil around them. Right? The desires that pop up, right? The urges that pop up. Ooh, I really want that popsicle. Right? Ooh, I really want to live in this place. Right? Ooh, I really want to punch this person. Right? Whatever it is coming up. We take it really seriously. We get really hung up in it. Why? Because from this perspective, it's all there is. Right? All this elseness, all this outside stuff feels to us like an outside world coming in, kind of invading our little country. Because this little country is what we have when we lie down in bed and we close our eyes. All of a sudden, the trees and the planet and all that stuff, they seem kind of gone. And we're here in this little world with these same thoughts rattling around, these same urges bubbling up from below, these same patterns. And so we get essentially lost in a world of me, right? And this is where we suffer. Right? And this is what the Buddha talked about with his noble truths, right? A reality of life is suffering. That's essentially because of selfishness. Selfishness, I'm not talking about here of taking for myself at others' expense, although I think that is a symptom of this. I mean selfishness in a very literal sense, that we identify ourselves exclusively as essentially where our skin ends. And when our realm of core concern ends where our skin does, we get caught up in this little world, and we essentially become the playthings. We get pranked by our mind and our guts, because it's like, oh, you are this amazing God, right, who's incarnated himself down in an individual being, but all you're going to do is care about what this primate body is telling you to care about. You're going to essentially coil in on yourself, loop in on your own being, and just obsess over what's happening in here and treat what's happening out here as essentially a distraction or something, or, you know, something that's totally else, that's not you. And this is, you know, you can call it Mara or fear, you know, the Loki, the great prankster of the universe. It revels in this design because you then become a house of mirrors, a plaything that it can just have its way with, right? And I think when we see people doing, you know, things that we know from their own perspective they wouldn't choose for themselves, if they had even a little bit of remove from themselves, if they could see themselves from another perspective, they wouldn't keep doing this destructive habit. They wouldn't be as abusive as they are, perhaps, as violent as they are, perhaps. And I think the reason we struggle, even when we know what we're doing is destructive, is because we're caught in this loop of me, believing that this is all that we really are, that we're this private, shut away, kind of autonomous thing, and that our job is to keep this me, to make this me presentable to myself and the world, to make it acceptable, and to serve it, to get it what it wants, to get it what it's demanding, to keep it in balance, right? Even if that means, hey, me keeping myself in balance means I need to hate you, right? I need to stick to this political opinion, right? To this environmental opinion, whatever it is. That's what I've identified with myself. That is a core part of me. And so because you have this different viewpoint, no, you don't fit in my world. You aggravate me, you upset me, you complicate my view of things. I have a hard enough time keeping this little thing straight, much less trying to understand you, so you stay away, right? Aversion, right? Or the opposite, man, you really validate me. You really reflect back to me all the things that I'm hoping to see about myself. That's infatuation. We pull that toward us, right? We try to suck that into ourselves. The third klesha the Buddha talked about was ignorance, right? And I think ignorance is essentially getting coiled up in this and thinking this is the only truth. This is a truth, right? What is the truth of? It's a pattern. But it's not the truth of what we are. We are this. We are this. We are this. We are this, right? This is my conception of things. I boiled it down using terms and symbols that work for me. Essentially, though, I think if you go deeply into a contemplative practice long enough, meditative practice, you'll realize a truth that may not look like this in its format, but is going to have something similar, which is, whoa, there's a lot more to this than I thought. And this thing is a trap. This thing is really like handcuffs on you. It's like a lead boot on our foot. It really holds us back from realizing our full potential. And in fact, we don't even know what our full potential could be, because when we think of potential, we immediately loop back into ourselves and go, what can I accomplish with this body in this life? And we limit ourselves to what we already believe and think, right? To the thought process we've already accepted within ourselves as good enough. And then we surround ourselves with other people who do the same loop, right? We keep away people who complicate our loops by presenting different ideas, and we denigrate them. We say they're stupid. We say they're awful. They don't get it. Why? Because they complicate the hegemony of what we already think and we already feel, which this thing wants to constantly reinforce. What I want to do is I want to work then, if that is kind of a bottom-up view and we're getting stuck in kind of our primateness, why don't we try to go down from what you might call more divine or spiritual perspective to have another outlook on what we are, right? I'm going to draw our person again. This could be me, this could be you, me, this could be other me. This being is an expression and an experience of the entirety of what is, right? And what I mean by that is this person here, right? Hey, use my name, Joe, right? We can use Jane Doe. We can use Professor X, right? Call this person whoever you want. Their oneness, their God, They are all spirits. They are in fact all physical beings as well, although from their perspective, it's very hard to believe that, again, because of that feel and control we have over our body that we don't feel with other bodies. But the divine truth, as I understand it, is that this person, right, this physical being is an aperture through which oneness experiences the entirety of oneself, including the interior experience of being this being, right? So this looping identity I talked about before, this is not wrong. This is not untrue. It's just limiting, right? And it's only untrue if it presents itself as the entire picture, right? It's incomplete. It is a relatively small piece of a much larger picture. But in the larger picture, this piece is not denied. It's just integrated into a larger framework. Everything that is, right, is experiencing our experience at the same time through us, right? It's utter co-experience without limitation, right? You could be sitting next to someone on a bus, and what I'm saying the divine truth is, that person sitting next to you on the bus, right, they're looking down, right, at their phone, scrolling something, you're sitting here with your headphones on, you, sitting on that bus, that person is fully experiencing the entirety of what you are. Now, down here, right, in I land, lowercase I land, again, we have this experience right now, right? Where I'm me, you're you, we're separate, right? We have these distinctive senses of our bodies. And so this person in their brain is not getting that signal fed to them. But in their spirit being, in their God being, and in their oneness, which they never stop being, this is not a separation from that. This is essentially just a deep instantiation of that uses a lot of ignorance and confusion and disbelief to create what feels like a separate experience. The only thing that's unique about it is the perspective, right? But that person's spirit and their Godhead and their oneness are all experiencing the entirety of my experience. There's nothing that's private. There's nothing that's kept out. It's a full feed. Including if I look over at them. That's them looking over at themselves through the perspective that I identify as me only, again, because I think this is private, because I think this is exclusive, and it's not. Everybody else is, right? Parents are looking through, right? Is this starting to get cringy, right? Exes are looking through. Go crazy in history, right? Attila the Hun is looking through. Julius Caesar's looking through. Mother Teresa. Pick the person in history you most admire. Pick the one you least admire. Pick the one that you're most blah about. They're all looking through. Everybody, everything is looking through the entirety of your experience. Okay, now what's maybe cringy about that is it feels very voyeuristic. And I know when I have that thought, I immediately start to tighten up. I'm like, oh my God, do they see that? Especially if it's someone who I'm around, right, and I'm judging them, or I'm going, oh, I'm better than you, or you suck, or, whatever, all that negative stuff we tend to loop in when we're here trying to reinforce our values at the expense of others. I go, wait a minute. So I'm sitting here judging you, but you are actually experiencing my experience as fully and richly as I am. Even though that's not manifesting in your physical being, your spirit self, your God self, and your oneness are all having a full immersion in me, including knowing that I'm judging you. I feel guilty. I feel ashamed, right? When I think that, because I've convinced myself, hey, I'm judging you, right? I'm thinking negative things about you, but hey, at least I've kept that in my little shell. At least I've kept that in kind of my private bubble, and maybe I'll gossip about it with someone else to reinforce that negative view, because then they're gonna go, oh yeah, how stupid or silly that is, right? And I tell myself, but I'm being a good person because I'm not letting you see it, right? Now, well, that's gone, right? Because they are fully experiencing it. There's nothing that's hidden. There's no little corner or pocket I can tuck this into. They are fully experiencing the entirety of it, actually more fully than I and my physical being am, because I'm always hiding things from myself, right? The yin yang, got the darkness over here with the little white light, I, and then the light over here with the little dark eye. And in this little coil loop, I'm only identifying with the things that I've deemed acceptable, welcome in me, and all the things that are in me that I deny, I shove into my darkness and I pretend they're not there, right? They hide in my shadow. And so when I'm in this lowercase I perspective, at least where we as human beings are right now, where I as a human being am right now. I'm still very much in this. And so even I, in this perspective, don't fully appreciate just how much is going on in my shadow, because again, I've kind of shoved it into the darkness. I'm not seeing it. It's in a warehouse 5 counties away from my mental space right now. And so I have to come to terms with the fact, I don't have to, but I'm choosing to come to terms with the fact in my belief system that, in fact, you are experiencing the richness of my judgment of you more fully than even I am, right? That is an offensive notion to this. And yet I believe it's true. And, okay, so what do we do about the voyeurism fear, right? Oh my God, like, this person is seeing me judge. This person is seeing me judge that, like, how can they not get hung up on that? Maybe I picture if I'm sitting across from you and I think I'm making a really interesting point. Maybe I'm giving you my little speech right now and you're sitting there going, you're a fool, you're an idiot, you're confused, you're caught up in your head, etc., etc. And I think, wow, like if I were to get filtered through your mind and hear you say that, I'd be hurt. That doesn't square with my concept of thing. I like to think of myself as smart and telling the truth, right? All that stuff. I've hidden, right, anything to the contrary in my shadow. And so what I'm doing is I'm projecting from here what it would be like to experience from here. Do you see the foolishness, right? I'm so coiled in my own stuff, I can't imagine even another perspective existing. Whereas from these perspectives, they respect what it's like to be in there, right? They have tremendous compassion for what it's like to be in there. Why? Because they're actually in there right now. There's no separateness, right? This is not removed from that. This is embedded within these, right? And just from these other perspectives, we accept this for what this is, realize it's kind of this little foolish game we play. We play it for as long as we need to get what we need out of it for our experience, for our evolution, for our growth, and then we evolve and move on, right? Become less caught up, perhaps less embedded here. I think it's not a quantum leap necessarily where we just get out of the shadow game, perhaps one where we soften the distinction between light and shadow, soften how much we disidentify with what we shove in here and identify with what we put in here. Okay, so if you are utterly co-experiencing everything in my mind, including all the things that I thought, man, if you were to realize I was thinking about this with you, you would hate me. You might even attack me. Well, what do I do with this? Well, not only is it completely co-experience, it's also co-creation and co-participation, right? In other words, I'm sitting here on the bus, the other person's sitting next to me. If I'm thinking a judgmental thought about the person next to me, that person in their spirit self and in their Godhead and in the oneness, right, kind of the, I don't like this metaphor, but I'll just throw it out there, kind of the emulsion of, which is the entirety of us, where there's no differentiation at all. Everything is boiled down to a single point that is actually no point at all. What? It's not just co-experience, it's co-creation and co-participation. In other words, it is creating that judgmental thought about this, right? This person's fuller self is creating that and is participating in having the thought in me. In other words, it's not like they are creating it and then I'm doing what I want with it. There is no me that is separate. There is no me that is distinct. This person's spirit self, God self, and oneness, I am an expression of them to the same extent that they are of themselves, right? I think it's tempting to have kind of a private legacy. I do this. I think I've actually even done this in some of my videos. Maybe I'm just now beginning to realize a little fallacy in my thinking. I think, okay, yeah, there's oneness and there's God, and then God individuates into spirits, and then spirits individuate into physical beings, and then I get to redraw my line. I get to go, okay, no, sorry. This spirit really is creating any person that this being experiences is fully a co-creation of this spirit to the same degree that this is. In other words, it's fully intermixed. It's like a village where, yes, maybe there's biological parenthood, but then there's no entitlement to that parent and no disentitlement to another parent to fully participate in any of the children's lives as much as possible, right? We don't draw these rigid lines and say, how dare you, right? Or God, how could I? Everyone is a free being, essentially co-created, and we're all like, I'm kind of tripping over myself right now, but it's hard for my mind to understand, and I'm sitting here with a whiteboard telling everyone around about it, like, everything I'm doing right now, you are causing to happen to the same extent that I am. Everything you're doing right now, I am causing to happen to the same extent you are. And if we only limit ourselves to where our skin ends, that's going to be an absurd and perhaps even falsifiable notion. But if we are able to embrace a larger perspective, a divine truth that when you and I are in each other's physical presence, it means our spirits are utterly in co-creation. They're in this dance with each other. And even if I am shooting you, right, or you're throwing a spear at me, or you're tripping me as I walk on the sidewalk, that doesn't mean our spirits are hating each other, right? Our spirits are creating these experiences for their benefit, for the benefit of, well, it's irreducible really, but I think one of them is to begin to see the patterns of our own confusion so that we can undo them. And it's not like my spirit is just creating me and your spirit's just creating you. In this moment, we are fully co-creating each other. That is just utterly wild. And I think it then softens this notion of the voyeurism fear. Oh my God, are you seeing what I thought I hid stuff private. I thought I had stuff tucked away. It also then gets into the guilt and the shame fear. If I do throw a spear at you, right? If you do trip me or hit me over the head or say that insulting thing to me that, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. You've just broken my heart or devastated me. If one of us or both of us is going to leave that encounter and then go into this private coil of guilt and shame, oh, what a terrible person I am, right? Or judgment of the other person, right? Projecting that guilt and shame outward, what a terrible person they are. We're kind of ignoring the silliness of that, which is that each of us on the spirit level co-created the entirety of the experience for each of us on the physical level, including the experience of the shame and the guilt. And so really what evolving is, what maybe having a spiritual awakening is a deep experience of pattern recognition. I think it happens in the intuition and the heart more than the head brain, but a pattern recognition of what we're doing. And then once you kind of get to a level where you're seeing this and believing this, beginning to realize the absurdity of these patterns, really the silliness of these patterns, because how does it make sense for me to feel guilt and shame about what I did to you when you actually co-created, co-participated in, and co-experienced the entirety of what I quote-unquote did to you? You caused me to do that to you as much as I did to me, right? I mean, this breaks down all the pretexts we have for, criminal justice, for the assignment of blame, for the assignment of liability, things like that. And I'm not here saying wipe those systems off the board, get rid of them, they're foolish. I'm not taking any position on that. Instead, what I'm asking us to do is to recognize on a fundamental level the absurdity of having negative emotions about what we do to others or what others do to us, because on a higher level, we created the entirety of the experience, including what they did. And we created the negative emotion essentially as an opportunity for us to have a choice. Do I want to coil into this? I've been in the belly of this snake how many times now and seen what it's done to me how many times? With recognition, I recognize I'm going down this shame spiral. I'm going down a guilt spiral. I can say, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or if I am, I'm going to go through it consciously. I'm not going to give myself away to the stories that I hear and hear, right, to the stories about who I am and what I am. I'm going to be fully conscious and awake, and I'll go into the belly of the beast. But I'm not going to give up my notion of who I am and what I believe, which hopefully at a core level is that I'm someone who's worthy of happiness. I'm someone who's worthy of good things. And if we're believing that we're not, we're caught up in the belly of the snake somewhere. And this feeling that it's not right, but then feeling like we're trapped, is an invitation to experience it more consciously the next time around. When we see this, we go, oh great, I'll just go be oneness. We always want a shortcut. Okay, I'll just be God. Okay, I'll just go right up and be a spirit. What we learn again and again and again is that time, the unfolding of time, is not a mistake. It unfolds perfectly. It's not some thing we're stuck in that we need to hack our way out of. I think that's haste, right? What does haste make waste? It's a shortcut that leads you right back to where you started. Each step of recognition is an invitation that the next time we see a pattern unfolding that we know isn't good for us, to be more aware than we were the last time. Because the more aware we are, the more we'll realize what's going on. And you don't even need all that spiritual stuff to appreciate the absurdity of guilt. Why would you coil yourself in some negative story about yourself unless you thought you were deserving of punishment? And why would you think that? Because you've told some story about yourself. Do you see how it is a snake eating its own tail? And so when you begin to realize guilt and shame are never wise decisions for myself, right? Contrition may be a very wise decision. What's the difference with contrition? Hey, I threw a spear at you. That really must have freaking hurt. I see that I've caused your arm to go off. Let me try to make that right. Contrition is trying to make amends in a relationship based on a negative feeling we have in ourselves, which says, you know what I did to that person, it's not cool. If I was in their position, right, how would that have felt, right? And it's an invitation to empathy and to compassion. And so contrition isn't getting caught into stories about myself of how terrible or awesome I am. It's a recognition on this level that our choices and our actions cause actions here. And we can have a spiritual bypass. We can go, oh, you know what? I don't need to make amends to you. I don't need to feel contrition. Why? Because you co-created that experience as much as I did. That's the same thing I was talking about before. That's trying to skip a step. Embrace time, right? Embrace experience. Embrace emotion, right? I threw a spear at you, right? It resulted in your arm having to be amputated. What am I experiencing? I'm experiencing a temptation to feel guilt and shame, which really, though, is a contrition in my heart over what I did to you. And it doesn't even have to be a regret. I don't have to pretend like I have a time machine and I can say, oh, I could go back. If I could go back, I would do it differently. I can look you in the eye and say, Jesus, man, I am so sorry for what I did to you. And let me do what I can now to try to make amends. And the amends can be, of course, trying to address the harm I caused. The amends could also be, especially if there was a relationship before, trying to reestablish that relationship so the flow of love can move more freely between us. And so time is really an opportunity, right, for us through experience to gain better and better recognition of what patterns are unfolding before us, to recognize then where we have choice in these patterns, and then to recognize which choices are wiser than others. And there's no substitute, I believe, for this than trial and error. I don't think we, from our Godhead, from our spirit self, stuck ourselves here just to have one big laugh at the absurdity of it all and say, oh, I get it, and then rapture up to oneness. Right? What we've done is given ourselves the ability to recognize, aha, I keep playing the same game over and over, and it's not working for me. What do? Open my awareness. What does opening my awareness do? It allows my intuition, right? The intuition of my gut and the intuition of my heart to recognize patterns that I in my head, with what I already think, can't see. Because what I already think is what keeps leading me back down this tube, back down this coil. But my intuition and my heart have the ability to recognize things and actually empower choice points. Hey, I'm this far into the coil. I've been there. Boom, I'm out. Right? I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to breathe and relax. I'm going to choose to renounce guilt and perhaps pivot to something more healthy. Maybe my guilt is an indicator that what I really want to do is to make amends with someone. What I really want to do is to be contrite. What I really want to do is contemplate and learn from my experience. Maybe I want to make amends, but I don't feel like I could do it. I don't feel like I can look the other person in the eye and say those words. I feel like the words wouldn't come out. I'd be stuck. That's an invitation to contemplate. Let me really think about what's going on here. And again, not contemplating in the monkey mind, not getting into the labyrinth of the thinking mind, which is always going to try to go back to what we already think and what we already feel. Opening our space up, right? Whether it's through any meditative technique, focusing on our breathing instead of our thinking, right? Focusing on our body instead of our thinking, counting instead of thinking, or just sitting back in an open space and noticing thinking occurring. This, I think, is what allows the intuition in the heart to expand, to open, to be receptive to new ways of doing things. And this is what I think frees our higher self, our spirit self, to start sending those messages in. And that may be what allows us to see and to realize really on the heart level, aha, I get it. And now we may not even have to rehearse what we're going to say before we go. We can just know in our heart, okay, I'm ready. And we can go to that person, look them in the eye, and make those amends, right? Express our contrition. Because we got out of our guilt and shame spiral, we got into our hearts, and we gave our hearts the time enough to ripen and to mature, to realize when we're ready to go back, and to try to make, you can't really make right what went wrong before. Even right and wrong, I think, is a confused perspective. Just really on a human-to-human level, to say, hey, I get it. I hurt you. Right? Notice what that's doing. It's breaking down that me bubble. I hurt you. Right? And let me see what I can do now, from my perspective now, to try to make things better than they are, right? To try to take this harm that I caused and try to maybe restore you to a state, because maybe you're caught in a guilt loop, right, of your own, or a shame loop thinking you deserved that, right? Maybe I get to at least tell you, hey, you didn't deserve that, I'm sorry. And maybe that then helps you escape your guilt loop. Maybe that helps reopen our connection, right? Maybe it does nothing for you, and I'm just expressing my contrition unconditionally, just to try to restore in my mind the truth, which is I don't want to harm other people. Other people don't deserve to be harmed. My anger and my frustration in me is not an excuse or a justification to inflict that outwards. And so my expression of contrition, if nothing else, is my affirming that for myself and my renouncing that more selfish viewpoint, which justifies the projection outward of pain, right? When really that projection of outward of pain is just an attempt to avoid feeling and experiencing the pain. And so, my board's even messier than usual. If I can just kind of clear the deck here, try and bring things home. Here's where we are. Here's also where we are. Here's also where we are. Here's also where we are. Our being here and believing and thinking we are here is not a mistake. It's not a sign of some shortcoming in us. Believing this to be true is not an invitation to try to jump and escape this, right? We may, in meditative states or in prayer or through the coming of grace, feel our experience more aligned on these levels than others. But I believe the purpose is not some kind of escape or avoidance or leveling up. If we're identifying as here, it's because this is where we, in our omniscience and our omnipotence and our omni-lovingness, are choosing to be. And it's always going to be mysterious on the level where we are of why we're here or what we're doing. But it's clear to me that what a lot of us are doing is playing this me game, right? Seeing our border as being our skin, and then coiling around our self-concern. And what I want to say is there's nothing wrong with this, but there's a whole lot more